Hey guys, welcome to episode 276 of Stand Up. Joining me today, actor and Buddhist monk, mentor, teacher of mine, the great Peter Coyote. He's back. I'm Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Hello there, my friends, and thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Stand Up. 276 episodes. Yeah, 276. I can't believe it. Seriously, I didn't think I'd be able to make this work. I'm not going to lie to you. I just didn't think I could pull all the elements necessary to produce a high-quality podcast without hiring several people to help me produce it. Someone to book it, and someone to edit it, and someone to help me produce it each and every day. I mean, there's so much, of course, that goes into it. Most podcasts have staffs of at least 3 or 20. But Valerie and so many of you told me I had to try to make it happen. I had to keep having the conversations with the smart people I had been for years. And Val said she wanted me to spend 2020 trying to make this thing work. And for weeks, with the help of some really amazing people in my life, like CJ Eichinger, who's a musician and singer-songwriter friend of mine and an expert at Adobe Audition, who held my hand and taught me all the software, and so many of you supported me in so many different ways, working every day of the week, and here we are. And the reason I'm opening today's show on this sentimental note, by the way, it should be noted, is because this week I'm trying to make an effort to think about taking it down a notch. Just for the week, try to work on some other projects related to the show, my website, video initiative, my stand-up album. And I'd also like to find some more time just to get outside and clear my mind of the news and the virus, and find new ways also to think and talk about all of it here with you, and correspond with many of you that I've been meaning to talk to, call and email and just connect with. So, I just need a little time off. It's been over 60 weeks of trying to get this thing off the ground, and while I'm still nowhere near where I want to be with this independent media and community creation, I definitely need a little break. I'm super excited and so thankful about where we're at with over 800 paying subscribers and a great partnership with an awesome sponsor, GiveWell, and the opportunity to do more advertising and obviously get more subscribers all the time. But I got to take it down a little bit this week, and I'm still planning to tape and post new interviews every day this week, but I'm just not going to be doing the normal news segments here at the top, which take a lot of thought and time to produce each night. And honestly, part of it is I need a break myself from the news. So this week, I'm planning to just reach out to smart folks, have conversations about life and things and stuff that you'll hopefully enjoy hearing and learn along with me, and then spend some time alone, quiet, with nature, with my family if possible. And so that's the plan for this week. And if you're someone who is a small business owner or self-employed, or you work for yourself, hell, reach out to me and tell me how the hell I'm supposed to manage this concept, this idea that if you don't work, you don't produce anything. You don't produce revenue. You're not, in my case, moving subscriptions and constantly talking about that. I'm still going to do an episode every week, but it's just not going to be my normal product, which is several elements that hope make you want to come back here every day in terms of the news segments, a couple different interviews to choose from, and I just can't seem to stop, because to stop is to regress. It's to miss a beat, miss a step, miss the opportunity to promote and progress the show. And whether you're hosting a podcast or you're laying tile for a living, and I have 2 friends who actually do flooring in Vermont, and they're self-employed, so I think about them often, or whatever else you're doing that's self-employed, help me understand the lifestyle. I've been working for a company for so long. Of course, before that, I was a comedian, but I was young and single, and then my daughter was young, but, I was still mostly just doing personal appearances and stand-up and audience warm-up and that kind of thing. But to have the podcast be my primary job and to be working entirely for myself for the most part now. I mean, I'm doing gigs and I'm available. So give me a call if you want me to drop in on your Zoom party to host a team building exercise and make fun of everybody in your family or in your firm. But I'm really good at that, unfortunately. I'm not proud of it, but I am. Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com. But I am doing all this myself from the solar powered shed, and I'm loving it. But I need help trying to understand how to manage the life and how to take time off, because I really thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing, but I also value time off, getting out in nature, seeing family and friends, snowboarding, skiing, going on hikes, whatever, traveling a little bit, doing anything with my family. So let me know any advice you have, any thoughts. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. I will be hosting the Stand Up Happy Hour Hangout on Thursday at 8 because I love that. I get as much out of it as seemingly so many of you do. If you've never joined that, definitely do. And nothing could be better on a week when I'm worried about not moving new subscriptions to support this show than if you could subscribe to the show and become a paying subscriber and get all the benefits of the community that come along with it. Just go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or just click the paid subscription link in the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast. And while you're there, give it a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple. If you haven't done that, that also could be something you could do to help me out, support me, not being too stressed about this week. Give reviews on Apple Podcasts. I got to get to 1,000. I want to get to 1,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts this week. And I think I have like a little over 900. So we could do that, right? Okay. That's it. I'm very happy to share with you my conversation with Peter Coyote. We covered a lot of ground. I asked him, I think, good questions on several different issues about religion and sustainability and ego. We talked a little bit about politics. While I don't always agree with all of his analysis on anything, I think he's such a thoughtful man, and I thoroughly enjoy talking to him and listening to him talk about anything. Of course, Peter Coyote is a well-known, well-respected actor who has been in more than 130 films. He's an Emmy Award-winning narrator of over 200 documentaries, 17 audiobooks. So his voice alone is something that is of great value, and the fact that he gets to join me, we get to hear just the quality of his voice. I mean, he, of course, has narrated so many of the Ken Burns documentaries. Yeah, that's the guy that I'm about to talk to. If you've watched any of those, most likely Peter was the narrator of those documentaries. He is also happens to be a Buddhist monk, songwriter, guitarist, singer. I should say Buddhist priest, not Buddhist monk. He's a Buddhist priest. He has written several books, 2 memoirs, Sleeping Where I Fall and The Rain Man's Third Cure. Check him out at petercoyote.com. You can watch his Dharma talks that he's offering on his Facebook page. Also, Peter and I talked January 4th, so it was just a couple days before the insurrection, and obviously so much has happened since the inauguration and so on. So just so you know where we're at in terms of the world. And the conversation begins with me asking him about the counterculture, which he's written so much and talked so much about participating in back in the 60s. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Peter Coyote. I always want to take a deeper dive with you into what the counterculture is. You hear a lot of people hear that phrase and don't quite know what it means, and what, as you say, was the allure of it. You've written a lot about that time in your life, and I think it's fascinating that you went down that path and you explored that. And for some people, I think that's an era that is lost, and for other people's that may be listening, it's an era that they're not familiar with. But for you, what was it, and why did you pursue it?
Well, I grew up in a political household. I grew up during the McCarthy period. I grew up during the civil rights struggles. I had a very clear idea and understanding of areas in which America was not keeping its promises to its citizens. And when I got to California, there was something afoot. I moved into the Haight-Ashbury 3 months before the psychedelic shop opened. And there was some kind of hopeful resurgence of a bunch of young people coming to agency, coming to their power around 1965. And some of it was manifested politically, like the Berkeley Free Speech Movement and SDS and communists and the Black Panthers. And a bunch of it was manifested culturally. And my group, my gang, which all came from the San Francisco Mime Troupe, a kind of radical agit-prop theater, Punch and Judy shows, imitating old 16th century Italian commedia dell'arte, rewritten for political issues of the day. We felt that culture was stronger than politics. We didn't feel like American people were going to throw their bodies on the balustrades to defend capitalism. But we thought if they were living lives that meant something to them and that they liked and loved, they would defend them. So we began by dealing with a problem, which was thousands and thousands of runaways in the Haight-Ashbury. The Haight-Ashbury had been advertised in the papers. Kids were seeing it as a tabula rasa, a free zone where you could re-identify yourself or invent yourself. And they were coming to California, and they were bringing thousands of tourists to California to look at us. Tourist buses would be driving through the neighborhood. And the city was doing nothing to recognize the existence of these kids. So we decided to feed them. And we went out and we hustled enough food to feed 600 people a day in Golden Gate Park. They just had to show up with a bowl. And the only thing we asked them to do was to step through a 6 foot by 6 foot rectangle painted yellow. And we called it the free frame of reference. And when they came through, they got a little 1 inch by 1 inch free frame of reference to hang around their necks. And it was an invitation to look through it and see everything in the world as free, just an act of imagination. So from that, we expanded to a free store where there was everything you would need for a life in there, usually old, outdated, but repaired, fixed in good shape. And the implicit question was, why do you want to get a job and become an employee to become a consumer? We'll give you the shit. Now, what do you want to do? And so the free store was like theater that people didn't know was theater. People would come in and say, who's in charge here? We'd say, you are. If they stood there and looked stupid with their mouth open, there was no sense blaming the pigs or the man or the system. They had been given an offer to invent themselves, and they didn't. But they might say, oh, I'm in charge? Okay, well, I hate the way these shirts are done, so let's go. And we would redo the entire store. My favorite story was of an elderly black woman that was in the store one day while I was at the front desk, and she was stealing. She was putting stuff in a bag. So I went over to her and I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but you can't steal here. And she got really indignant. She said, I'm not stealing. I said, no, I know you're not, because it's a free store. Everything's free. But the thing is, you think you're stealing. So you don't have to hide what you want. Just take it off the rack and take it. She looked at me. She said, you mean I just take it? I said, yeah, it's free. The sign says it's a free store. She said, then get out of my face. I said, okay. So I got out of her face. 2 days later, she came back with a big flat of day-old donuts and left them on the counter. She got the free economy just like that.
Yeah.
So we had, for instance, a whole bunch of stolen draft cards, and we had the forms to fill them out correctly, and we had the stamps from a couple of draft cards. And the word got out, and San Francisco, Oakland was a port by which boys were sent to Vietnam. And so soldiers would come in uniform, and with a little discreet questioning, Billy from Omaha would leave as Bobby from Park City, and he'd hang his uniform on the thing, and he'd take out clothes that were there. And then someone else would come and wear his uniform around the street. So that was our form of war resistance. So we did this for a number of years, trying, and it was called a counterculture, because we thought America was going to collapse within 5 years. And we thought it was too overburdened. It was using too much. It was too polluted. It was too imperialistic, whatever we thought. We were not correct. But neither was it our highest aspirations to run a soup kitchen. So after about 3 years of doing this, we began to move out to the country and create communes. and began to experiment with different styles of living that were more sustainable, organic food, different kinds of holistic medicine. And we did that for a long time until basically kids came along, and we couldn't operate without money anymore. And we couldn't operate in chaos anymore. Like, just do your thing. You can't have Wino Eddie playing the tom-toms at 4 a.m. when mom's waking up to nurse at 5.
Right.
It just doesn't work.
Is it possible to scale that kind of lifestyle up, do you think? And I mean, is there an economic system that you think is most equitable or more fair that has ever been tried?
Well, no. And I've got to say that we were experimenting. We were not promulgating this as the way to be.
Right.
We were just saying this is more fun. If I could have gotten free education and free health care for my kids, I'd still be living on a commune.
Why? Like, what's great about it?
Well, first of all, you have lots of mothers to help you, and you have lots of brothers to help you. Mm. So you're always working with your friends. At night, we'd play board games, we'd play cards, we'd play music. The kids were there. They knew what our lives were about. Daddy didn't disappear in the office all day long, and the kids were on their own. Girls who wanted to work on the trucks would work on the trucks. Guys who wanted to work in the kitchen would work in the kitchen. And in every situation, there was always somebody that was the most equipped to deal with it. And what we learned was if you just let that person be the leader and you just follow that person for that job, everything's fine. And then when the job's over, the leadership's over. So, but unfortunately, we didn't own the land we were on. So we lost the land bases. And when kids got to school age, parents needed to settle near schools. And by that time, of course, Reagan was president, and the anti-government stuff was coming along. They locked up all the surplus behind the Safeways, which we were eating out of, to give to the hog farmers. And everything got colder and tougher and meaner. So people had to kind of fend for themselves.
When you're talking about your life when you were a young man, and now you're an older man, and there's this, I suppose it's every generation has this conversation or argument about who should be running the world. Should it be young people or should it be old people? Because who knows more, who has more of a stake and more incentive? And you think about Joe Biden, he'll be the easy oldest president we'll ever have. And there were other choices, but we didn't choose them. And when you think about some of the younger leaders that we've seen, and I'm trying to not make a value judgment because I want yours, but the future is my kids, climate, the economy, all of it. It's for them. It's not for you. It's not even for me. It's for them. And yet we are the ones making the decisions for their future. Joe Biden's like 79. He's going to be making really important, consequential decisions about the future of the planet for my 16 and 13-year-old daughters. Who should it be? Who should be making those decisions? Because young people don't know shit and old people know everything.
Well, so I just talked to a friend the other day who works at the UN. He's deep into politics. He knows very, very many of the Biden appointees. And he said what's really heartened him is that the cabinet members are kind of real competent Democrats. They're pros. They may not be radical, but they get the job done. They believe in democracy. They'll do the job. But the people that are under them are Bernie Sanders progressive, AOC progressives. And it's almost a strategy of putting people in that can get through the Senate or can get convened. And then you have all these bright young brains working on the problem. So what you want is you don't want to pick one or the other. You want brains to be in the container of wisdom. It's why I'm against term limits. We have term limits. It's called the vote. It means we as voters have to pay attention. Yeah. And so if you get rid of all the old people, you have no institutional memory. So let me give you a perfect example. To me, after Nixon, when Carter came into office, couldn't be a lovelier man than Carter. But his Secretary of Agriculture was a guy named Earl Butz, who was most famous for saying the only thing coloreds are interested in is a tight pussy, loose shoes, and a warm place to shit. And he also told all the family farmers, get big or get out. And he set in motion, he was Nixon's guy, and he set in motion a situation where all the farms went into debt. They were told that their rising land prices would protect them, and they should buy heavy equipment and farm fence row to fence row. Cut to Jimmy Carter's administration, and Paul Volcker, who was his Fed chairman, raises interest rates 5 points in a single day and wipes out hundreds of thousands of farmers in the Middle West. The leading cause of suicide on the family farm, the leading cause of death on the family farm was suicide. And for every 5 farms, you lost a local business. So the Midwest was turned into a dead zone. So when you want to start to look for Trump voters, start to look there. And then go to the savings and loan scandal, like 10, 12 years later, where they loosened the regulations on banking. And they plundered $250 billion of personal savings. 5 people went to jail, and not for long. Look for some Trump voters there. Then a decade later, President Clinton ends Glass-Steagall, which was the prohibition against commercial banks speculating in investments. And we crashed the economy as badly as the Great Depression. We still haven't recovered. So Democrats and Republicans for 50 years have put the interests of capital and the interests of money ahead of working people. So if I'm a Midwestern guy and I'm sitting there working now for agro industry on my family farm, which I've lost the heritage of my parents and grandparents. And I turn on the news and I see these chipper people with good haircuts laughing and yucking. I know they know nothing about me. And I can fully understand after 50 years of this why a whole bunch of people just took a Hail Mary pass and voted for a thief who campaigned on Bernie Sanders' rhetoric. So we helped contribute to that. And this is one of the things that I've been trying to communicate this last year. 2 years ago, I got asked to come to Harvard to teach, and I was teaching the theater of protest, which is something that we've forgotten, that a protest is an act of theater. It's a ceremony, and it's an invitation to a better world. And nobody accepts an invitation when they're being screamed at. So the agitation of me and my young friends during the counterculture, our drugs, our sex, our long hair, our flouting of conventions and norms, blinded us to the number of people that made up the majority that were put off by us and voted Nixon and then Reagan in office. So I take responsibility for that. And I tried to point out when I was teaching, if you look at the early civil rights marchers, they were dressed in suits and ties. They never raised their voices except if they were singing. You need to appoint monitors, give them yellow vests and whistles. At the first sign of violence, they blow a whistle and the protesters sit. Let the police take out their aggression on the provocateurs and the misbehaving people. Dress like you're going to church. It's hard to sell well-dressed people as terrorists. Make the protests silent. Let the signs do the talking. Let people see your discipline and go home at dark. Because the audience is not the people you're angry at. The audience is never the police. It's never the politicians. It's the broad spectrum of America between the Alleghenies and the Sierras. And they're looking and they're trying to figure out whose side they're on. And they're not all racist and they're not all misogynists and they're not all anything. They're looking to see who they can trust. And when they see people screaming in the streets and buildings being burned, they become Republican campaign videos and they say, well, better we stop the disorder than this. And I'm afraid we could be seeing a repeat of that. I think that's why the Democrats lost 10 seats. I think that the Democrats, just like Nixon, linked hippies with LSD and black people with heroin. The general public has linked the left with social disorder and riot. And while they may have known that Trump was too big a crook to give a second term to, they put controls on him. They split their ballots. So I'm trying to explain the mistakes we made, because democracy is a numbers game. You need 51%, or your ideas are just memes. It's just bullshit. So unless you get 51%, you're talking to your hand. So to do that, it means you have to make common cause with people that may be more socially conservative than you are. They may be Christians. They may be pro-life. They may be all sorts of things. But you have to make common cause where you can. And you have to behave in a way that doesn't insult everything they believe in. You know, if you don't bathe, if your hair's long, if your face is tattooed, they're not going to be comfortable inviting you to church or to their homes. And that's where you have to discipline yourself. And it's hard as young people, because you're getting this power, you're getting these ideas, and you think this is what it is. We're taking over. But you're not taken over. You're part of urban educated elites or urban people that are very, very sophisticated, and you're expecting the rest of the country to be the same, and it doesn't work that way.
What about religion? What about your journey in relationship to it? You're a Buddhist priest now, and I want to get into a little bit about that, but talk to me a little bit more about the religion you were born into, what role it played, and how you discovered Buddhism.
Well, I mean, nominally, I was born into a Jewish family, but my family was very secular. My mother had cousins who were communists and socialists, and my mom was really into civil rights. My dad was kind of like a new style Robin Hood. He took from everybody and he kept it. And for a long time, he was a wealthy guy, and then he lost it all. But I was lucky. I got a great education. But it was a secular education. But it wasn't until near the end of the counterculture, after, 10 years of heroin and too much excess to talk about, that I really saw that I needed some kind of guidance. And I'd always been interested in Buddhism since I ran into the Beat Poets and read about Gary Snyder and read Jack Kerouac and read Philip Whalen and Michael McClure. And as luck would have it, I began to go out with a woman who was living in a Zen Buddhist monastery. And so I started to sit. And, it didn't go well. Let's just put it that way. I assumed that I was already enlightened and I was just going to get a little polish. And the rigors and the forms of Zen practice were just galling. They made me nuts. But I persevered, and little by little, my mind started to calm down. My body started to get stronger. And somewhere along the line, I kind of woke up to see things as they really are. And so Buddhism isn't exactly a religion, because we don't think Buddha was holy or magical. Buddha was a teacher, and he taught people how to prevent unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary suffering is not the suffering of an earthquake or, your home gets attacked by soldiers. Unnecessary suffering is your mind, where it takes you on trips, or it's envious, it's competitive, it's jealous. Hatred, greed, hate, and delusion are the three gifts that humans bring into the world. There's nothing more demanding than a little infant baby. But that little baby, with practice and work, can grow up to be the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa or the Pope. So when I began to realize this, and I began to realize how much training I needed and how much training my mind needed, luckily I had grown up with dogs. I had trained lots of puppies. And so I could start to relate to training my mind like training a puppy. You keep bringing it back to the breath. You stop following it into every little alley. You have a posture that you sit in, and by sitting still, it slows down impulses to the mind. And little by little by little, the mind calms down so that you see the world without static. And once you have some kind of a wake up where you realize that you're attached to the entire world, you've never been free of oxygen. You've never been separate from sunlight. You've never been separate from pollinating insects or microbes in the soil that grow your food, or the people that grew the cotton, spun it, sewed it into the shirt you're wearing. And if you take it all the way out, yes, it's true. Of course, you have a sense of self, this sack of skin that we carry around. But that's only half the story. The other story is that we're all part of one big thing. And wisdom involves shuttling between those 2 points of view, so that you don't just believe everything you think. You just don't believe everything that you see from your small mind, which is filtered through your ego. That meditation allows you to drop out of your personality and into big mind, which is the space surrounding everything. And that space is the ultimate curative space. And it also engenders a kind of love of and compassion for the world. You realize that everybody's running away from what they don't like. Everybody's afraid of dying. Everybody's running toward what they want. And you're no different. And it allows you to look at people, even Donald Trump, with some kind of compassion and pity. You watch him walk down the stairs from a plane. You see a doddering old man. And you can just imagine what his reality is inside his head. I don't want to fall on television. They'll laugh at me, right?
His pants are also filled with shit, is what I'm told by the people around him. I mean,
is what?
He's got poop in his pants, so I have compassion for that as well. He's got an issue there, apparently.
Well, so it doesn't do much good to just shout at each other.
Right.
And since we're all the same, since we're all humans, what's different between us is our experiences. So when you tell me something that I don't believe or I disagree with, the best thing I can do is say, why do you think that way? And try to understand what brought you that way. And I'll tell you an actual story that happened. So in 1975, Gary Snyder won the Pulitzer Prize, and the governor appointed him to run a state arts council of working artists. And Gary and I were friends, and we'd been colleagues together, and he asked me to join. And the next year, I was elected chairman. But the first year, I was a ball of barbed wire. I'd been in a great theater, which had gone to New York and won prizes, never recognized in San Francisco. San Francisco put us on the cover of their Chamber of Commerce magazine and would never give us a nickel from their arts money. So I was pretty bitter, and I announced that it was payback time. Who cared about opera, symphony, and ballet? It was now going to be community theater. And in short order, I divided the entire state. I had it paralyzed. I had all the poor people on my side, and the people with real power were on the other side. And so I had sort of a revelation, and one of my friends, my closest friends on the council, who was a conservative Republican guy, said, listen, Jerry Brown's your guy. Why don't you go ask him to put $20 million up? We're fighting over $1 million in a state this big. Get him to put $1 million up, and let's try to pull everybody to fight for that. So I did that. I went to Jerry and I said, we won't ask you for any political capital. You just put that in your budget. And if we can't win it, we don't deserve it. So he did, and we started organizing. And that same year, Proposition 13 passed, which cut all state taxes, ruined the public school system. Every state agency was given a 10% cut, except mine. My budget went from 1 million to 5 million that year. And I realized that I owed apologies to people. So I went around, I ate crow. I went to all the operas and the symphonies. I went to all the conservative organizations, and I went around to every senator and a legislator that had something to do with us and got to know them. We talked about hunting and fishing and lots of stuff in common. And in short order, these guys began overruling the legislative analyst and giving me the money that I was asking for, overruling her, because they'd come to trust me. They knew I wasn't an ideologue. I straight up all the time with them. And they'd put their members on the Arts Council to try to find the fraud in it. And every time they did it, the guy was our closest ally within 6 weeks, because we did everything straight up. On my last, so I was chairman for 4 years, and then they passed a law that I couldn't do it again. So on my last finance hearing, I went up against these 3 old conservatives, Mount Rushmore. I'd been facing these guys for 4 years. And just before the hearing started, they all reached under the desk and they put on hippie headbands. And it was like saying goodbye. And I almost moved me to tears. Wow. I mean, these guys were saying, you done good. So I went from angry, self-righteous, telling them how it should be, to just creating human relationships. I don't know that I could have done that with Hitler, but I wasn't living in Nazi Germany. So I have experience of how this works. And when I left, the State Arts Council budget was $18 million a year. Wow. And the New York Council was following us. The National Endowment in Washington was copying several of our programs. And we made a huge change in the state culture. So I'm trying to get everybody to slow down and listen honorably and find out, why did these people vote for Trump? What is it about pro-life? Really? I mean, if my daughter gets an abortion, that doesn't threaten you. But if the climate goes up, it's threatening you and me. Yep. Can't we agree to work on this? But if you approach it with the I'm right and you're wrong, everybody just takes sides and nothing happens.
Well, I feel like I was just talking to my daughter, who's almost 16, and I was trying to explain to her the political realities of America and to some extent other countries and cultures today. And I didn't want to minimize things, but sometimes, especially when you're talking to today's 16-year-old, you really got to do your best to keep their attention, Peter, you know? And so I hated to make it a binary and a this or a that, but I do think there's a lot of truth to this idea when we're talking about Trump voters, or you're talking about conservatives or liberals or whatever, that I said to my daughter, there is a group of people, they're not the majority, but they're a very large minority, who don't believe that certain truths, certain things are happening. The election outcome, climate change, COVID. They don't believe these things that we're all experiencing and witnessing together are happening. And they do believe that things that are not happening are, in fact, occurring. And therein lies a lot of these QAnon theories and so on. I feel like a lot of what the Trump supporter, or it should be called almost a QAnon movement, is that they are just being informed of a different reality, a different truth. And they're not getting, I've had this happen to me myself, where I believed one version, and then I believed it for a long time, and then I heard another version and it debunked that one. I was like, well, that makes a lot more sense. But had I not heard the latter truth, I would have gone on believing what Oliver Stone told me. And so I feel like that's what's happening in our country. People are getting a truth told to them, fed to them in many different ways and places that's not true, and they're not living with us in what is actually happening to the planet, to people's lives regarding COVID, and much less other less scientific things like an election. What do you think of that binary?
Well, I think that's true. I think we have the bubble of Fox News. We have a 24-hour-a-day propaganda network. And myself, I know how complicated it is, but I don't understand why it's legal to tell lies in the public airspace. I don't know who would adjudicate the truth, right? But on the face of it, we can't run a democracy without facts.
Well, the people who, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that in your day, it was editors. It was you had to run your story past editors, and the editors had to fact check it and so on before it was printed. Now you can print, say, and do whatever you want with no consequences whatsoever.
That's true, but there was something else, which was that the news divisions of the media corporations were nonprofit.
Right.
William Paley said to his reporters at CBS, "Don't worry about money. I have Jack Benny to make money."
Right. Sports and
news
entertainment.
divisions were like the hood ornament on a Rolls Royce. And when 60 Minutes came out and made so much money, all the media divisions began demanding that their news media contribute to their profits. Well, there's an inevitable result. If you look at the planet Earth, the biggest circle you can make around the planet Earth is the equator. That's the mean IQ. That's what anyone in mass media wants. And as the circles go up, as the IQ goes up, they get smaller. So the news is designed, just like Facebook, to keep your attention in front of the sponsors. And so every story is framed in the most dramatic, the most binary, the most horse race, the most dramatic, but nothing is ever nuanced or analyzed. I mean, once upon a time, American farmers debated the gold standard in their Grange meetings. Americans are not stupid. But you spend 50 years cutting the education budgets, consolidating the schools so that there's 40 kids in the classroom, when it's well known you can't teach more than 18. And when everything is organized around money, including our electoral system, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I can tell you two things that would fix it. I have no idea how to do it. If we had full federal funding of elections and absolutely prohibited gifts from lobbyists to legislators, emoluments, junkets, road trips, jobs, whatever, give them enough. They only make $174,000 a year. Then they make another $35,000 to $40,000 in donations from PACs. If you're Mitch McConnell, you make $500,000, the top 20 people. But it's not a lot of money given the private sector. So there's a huge inducement to get money to run their campaigns. If that were relieved, anybody could run for the Senate. You wouldn't need to have a war chest. And we would be attracting people, different people, who really want to serve. And for those people that do really want to serve, they're faced with draconian choices. Do I take the money from the Koch brothers and stay in office to take care of the environment and pay the piper, or do I not? So to me, the Gordian knot on which everything that's wrong in our culture is tied is the influence of money. And I don't, other than a general strike, enough people getting fed up and say, you know what, we're going to stop shopping.
Yeah.
We're just not going to give money to the people that are screwing us up. We'll trade old clothes with each other. We'll buy a gallon of gas. We'll buy the minimum groceries until these guys listen. But I don't know that that's going to happen.
What about just another large idea to explore with you, which is around sustainability and consumption and greed? I've been on a journey myself over the past several years, thinking more and more about that and how to make less of an impact and to consume less. And I think the most challenging part for me, for most people, is you can have anything you need tomorrow from anywhere in the world. And
flown in a jet, leaving toxic waste behind it.
Of course. I mean, I've talked about this before, but ordering like single items in huge boxes, like a little gadget or cream or something, coming in a huge box surrounded by now these inflatable plastic packets. The human species is using so much of our natural resources. And how far back do we need to go? And what kind of philosophies have impacted you when thinking about, I think, starting with greed, leading to consumption, and what is most consequential now is the sustainability of our planet and our species on it, because the rest of the species will have been damaged or gone extinct because of us in many ways, but they'll live on regardless of what happens to us.
Look, the dirty little secret of the environmental movement is there's nothing about this culture that's sustainable. You can change all the LED light bulbs. I have 23 solar panels on my house. I charge my car with sunshine. I do what I can, but I'm one guy living in a 1,700 square foot house. This house would hold 27 Guatemalans. We have so much of everything, and our idea of our entitlement is that, oh yeah, I can have blueberries in February. Do I care that they're flown from Chile? Do I really care when I have my environmentalist friends over and I serve them blueberries? No, because I'm doing good work. I'm saving the polar bears in my spare time. So unless we're willing to really downsize and leave a little space for other people on the planet, we're just kidding ourselves. But that's why communes attracted me, because one big refrigerator would serve 20 people. One oven would serve 20 people. And now with new age materials, you can take an old shed and make it cozy and comfy for cheap. I lived in a little 10 by 11 horse shed. You know, I put old doors from the dump along one wall, and every winter I had to cover it all with plastic to keep the rain out. But it was me, my wife, my kids. I had a wood stove. I had to cut firewood. So
were you happy?
Yeah, I was pretty happy. I mean, I had a lot of personal stuff I hadn't worked out, or I wouldn't have been using heroin. So let's keep the attention on the right stuff. But, you know, really, the only people that are really doing it are monks. They got 3 bowls, they got a mat, they got a robe, and they got sandals. So we're not going to do that, but we can make the attempt. We could say to Amazon, I'm not buying anything that comes with plastic in it. We could say to the manufacturers, I love this product. I'm not buying it because it's wrapped in plastic. If everybody did it, if you went to your market, I went to my market and I said, I want to buy these berries, but I'm not going to buy them because they're in plastic boxes. Couldn't you put them in pressed paper? She said, you know, we tried that, but people stole. I said, what do you mean? She said they'd take the berries out and they'd make their own paper one bigger. Right? Heavier, more berries. Right. So the reason I became a Buddhist was I realized everything comes down to individual intention and individual behavior. There's no system that you can invent that people can't screw up. And so personal greed is based on the delusion that you have an independent existence. So the quicker that I can get you to wake up to realize that it's not independent, I'm changing you. And once you're changed, you'll stay changed forever. And the man who started my Buddhist lineage came here in 1961. And now there are millions of Buddhists in the United States, these little tiny zendos and people practicing these simpler, quieter lives. Doesn't sound like much, but if the United States was a human body and each of these zendos was cancer, you'd look at it and you'd be pretty alarmed that some radical change was afoot. So I think as you get older, you realize that everything takes much more time than you thought. And you can't use impatience as an excuse to be intolerant or to not embody. There's no difference between ends and means. The means are the end. The way you do something is the world you're creating. There's no difference between ends and means. So, and the same thing that there's no difference. There's only one moment. Time doesn't go from the past to the future. Time goes from this moment backwards. And everything in front of us is a wish, a hope, an idea, or a fear. It's only in this moment that we live. And if you take care of this moment, moment after moment after moment, you're doing what you can. And then you can let a lot of the grandiosity and a lot of the great scope disappear. Take care of this moment. Take care of who crosses your path. Take care of what your life actually intersects. And you're doing the work.
How have you dealt with ego in general? You're Peter Coyote. You have had a phenomenal career in so many different ways. You could have, I'm sure, gone in many different directions in your life. You probably could have made much more money if you wanted to work more or harder. I think a lot about ego and I'm trying to learn about my own, and I wonder what your outlook on it is and what your thoughts are about it personally with your own life, much less for mine or others.
So in the first place, your ego is not your enemy. Your ego is the thing that tells you to brush your teeth, to wash your face, to clean the wax out of your ears, to feed your pets, to take care of the kids, to fix the rotten step. It's not a warden. It's not a guard. But when you start thinking of it as a fixed object, when you start thinking of it as a shape or as an organ, you actually get the feeling that there's something separate from the rest of the universe. There's only awareness in there. You're an empty pipe. And what's inside the pipe is just awareness. And it's aware of your body. It's aware of your breathing. It's aware of your posture. So the problem is that the ego gets diluted. You get, I'm lucky that I didn't become an actor at 20 because I'd probably be dead. I became an actor at 40. I'd already lived 20 years of hard scrabble life, and I knew which end was up. And so I was pretty immune from flattery and, the kind of stuff that you get in Hollywood. But I didn't like the fame at all. And I finally left the movies because I decided it wasn't good for me. It was very hard to meet people on the horizontal. They would come with all sorts of ideas. Sometimes it was to knock me off the perch they imagined I was on. Sometimes they were too deferential. They weren't just straight across like they'd be with anyone. And I decided it was damaging to me to continue to exist in that milieu. So luckily, I wasn't quite talented enough as an actor to be like a huge star. I became an actor so that I wouldn't have to write for money and to get my kids through school and to buy a house for my wife, 2 wives, and then pay alimony till I was 81. But by the time my second kid was out of graduate school, debt-free, I thought, I don't have to do this anymore. And so I don't. But it's not because my ego is the problem. It's because other people's ideas about what fame and what show business is, they think that if they meet a celebrity, somehow they're going to have access to a life and adventures and stuff they'll never have. And it's just horseshit. And so they bring drugs, they bring all sorts of flattery and blandishments, and it's not the real world. It's not the way you're treated when you work with people that really care about you. So it stops your growth. And I didn't want to stop my growth.
So what did you do?
I just stopped doing it. I did a job in Canada for about 4 months. My last day's work, it was 37 below zero. And I thought, fuck this. I'm out of here. My kids are out of school. I don't have to leave home for 4 months. I don't have to live in a crappy hotel. I just don't have to do it. I miss my dogs. I miss my farm. And I want to write. And, it's hard to write when you're in your dressing room and every 20 minutes someone comes in and says, they're ready for you, sir.
Do what do you think about the idea of regrets? Do you have regrets?
Oh, yeah. Who gets old without regrets? I mean, but the question is, what do you make of them? They're in the past. All you can do is use those regrets to shape your next behavior. I treated some women horribly. I was careless with women, for instance. I've made my apologies to them. I've done what I could do, to be a friend, and save 1 or 2. I'm friends with all my old lovers, but I still regret my behavior. I regret that I spent more time than I should have saving the world and less time being a good dad to my daughter. It took me a long time to get my relationship straight with both my kids, who basically had an absent dad for much of their life. I had a good excuse. I was putting a roof over their head. I was paying their private schools and their groceries, but they didn't care. They wanted a dad. So if you don't regret things like that, I don't think you're human. But all you can do is dedicate those regrets to the next moment. And when my kids call me, no matter what I'm doing, I pick up the phone.
I love that. I love all of it. All right. Well, it's a good place to end, but we have to pick up again soon. very soon.
Well, I'm happy to see you again, Pete. It's always good to talk to you.
I'm happy to see you again, too. A lot of listeners have been asking, where's Peter Coyote? Where's Peter Coyote? And some.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
They don't say keep that loudmouth off?
Never. I'm very happy to have you joining me again. Last year around this time, you were you really saved me by being my friend and by giving me advice, and so much has changed in a year, as I told you privately, I think the last time we spoke, and I'll always be in your debt for being there for me when I needed you. So I really appreciate that. You've been a great role model and inspiration and friend, just a great friend.
Man. You're my friend. What can I say?
I appreciate that. That's
see you next time.
Looking forward.
Bowing out.
Bowing out.
See ya.
There you go, Peter Coyote. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of Stand Up. I hope that you will consider a paid subscription if you aren't already a member of our community. And if you are, I hope to see you this Thursday night at 8 Eastern for our regular Stand Up Happy Hour hangout. Looking forward to that. Who shall I get to join us? Taking suggestions now. All right, and I'll continue on with abbreviated shows this week, but hopefully I'm planning on posting new episodes every day, but forgive me if I don't. I know that you will. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed Peter Coyote. I thought that was a really great conversation. I just re-listened to it, edited up, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hope that you did too. And I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. You're never alone if you're a part of our community. Join us on the Discord platform anytime. I love you. Goodbye.
Stand up, you gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.
Hello, show enders. Here's a little surprise for you. I was talking to my big brother the other day, and he reminded me of this stand-up bit that I think I only did one night at the comic strip, and it's a little better video, and I go off mic in a moment here, but he reminded me of this bit I did back in, I think this was 2013 that I did, and it's criticizing the fact that the financial industry wasn't regulated. They didn't have rules. I wasn't sure how many comedians were doing jokes about financial deregulation at the time, but I like this, and my brother reminded me of it, so here it is.
It's really one thing. It's if you allow the smartest, wealthiest people on Wall Street to not have any rules, they will fuck us every time. Every time. And guess what we haven't done? Change the rules. It's like having the best NBA players not have a referee. They're gonna win. That's my shitty analogy to help you understand that one. Is it really? It's not. Is it really? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's Wall Street and then the rest of us. And it's not even them. If you work on Wall Street, it's not your fault. You're doing what anybody would do with those parameters. You're like, I can have all that shit? This is my impression of anybody working on Wall Street. I can just, I can take, it's going to screw those people? It is? Okay, will I have to meet them? I won't have to meet them? I've got your shit.
It's a good one. I won't have to meet them. Isn't that the key? Thanks for listening all the way to the end, show enders. Bye-bye.